Hello and welcome to Just a Damn Nerd. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Today we're talking about how 343 Industries has completely, categorically, and empirically failed in their time running the Halo series. The mistakes they made, the bad decisions they've made, and how they've alienated a tremendous amount of the fans. Now guys, we've already done 2 other videos on this channel, but those videos are focusing on Halo Infinite. We have one about Halo Infinite's multiplayer dying and why that's happening, and one on Halo Infinite Season 2 Lone Wolf. Fair warning guys, that one is really angry. I'm basically just kind of yelling at the TV, but that's because it really pissed me off when it came out. That one is genuine. I did that one right after I played Halo Infinite Season 2 Lone Wolves. So when we start thinking about the incredible amount of failure 343 Industries has had, and the embarrassing method of destroying a franchise that may have been the biggest in gaming before they took over, we have to first look at each project 343 Industries has worked on individually. Now, we're not going to focus too long on each project 343 had worked on individually, otherwise this video would be 3 hours long. If you guys want to see me do a deep dive into Halo 4 and especially why Halo 5 failed, let me know in the comments. So I'm not so much doing this empirically as I'm doing it by my own memory. I want to start with my first experience of a 343 product and go from there. Now guys, I'm a lifelong Halo fan. I've even played Infinite for over 200 hours. So I've played basically every Halo game for hundreds of hours. Even 5 I played for at least 50 hours, and 5 is my least favorite Halo game by a wide margin. I also have several days of playtime in on the Master Chief Collection on the Xbox and then again on Steam. So my love for Halo has been with me pretty much since Halo 1 came out in 2001. I got the original Xbox that came with Halo and NFL Fever, and I pretty much have never looked back in my time with this franchise. I love Halo so much that it was basically the only thing I wanted to do for like 10 years of my life. I played Halo 1 almost every day, and then when Halo 2 came out, I got addicted to its multiplayer and played it nearly non-stop. Then when I heard Bungie was leaving because Microsoft didn't want to let them make Destiny, so instead they left Microsoft and went to go work on Destiny for Activision Blizzard, I was very disappointed. I felt like the Halo franchise was done and we were losing what had made Halo special. So the first experience I had with 343 Industries management of this IP was Halo Forward Until Dawn, which is actually a surprisingly decent movie. It really wasn't bad, and it gave me some confidence that 343 could handle this IP. You see, the movie, instead of focusing on the Master Chief, it focuses on a bunch of trainees, people training to become Marines, and the Covenant are not really well known at this point. Like, the trainees really don't even know the Covenant exists, and they're watching footage of ODSTs being killed by an elite with an energy sword, and they really don't know what they're looking at. About 70% of the way through the movie, the Covenant attack the military academy the kids are in, and the kids are thrust into a survival situation. And that's the thing about this movie. They're Marines, but they're just trying to survive because the Covenant are so vastly superior. And then when everything seems lost, the Master Chief falls out of the sky and starts fucking everything up. And it was a fantastic way to do this film because it grounded us more in this small stakes. And when the Chief dropped in, it kind of gave you the feeling that every Marine would have in Halo when you showed up. It's like everybody's fucked and then the Chief's here, so now we're not anymore. I actually really enjoyed Forward Until Dawn, and it gave me great confidence that 343 had the ability to do this. A few months later, Halo 4 came out. And for the most part, my initial impression of Halo 4 was fairly good. I actually liked the main campaign in Halo 4. I know that 343 Industries had to go pick up one of the lead story writers of Mass Effect to finish the game because they were having so many issues writing the story, but I thought it paid off. However, I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't tell you guys that this was a very mixed game. A lot of people hated the way Cortana and the Chief's relationship was portrayed in Halo 4, but I overall kind of liked it. I thought it added a bit more drama to the game, and I liked the Didac. I thought he was a pretty interesting enemy, although I will admit the Prometheans were not fun to fight, and when I go back and play the game now in the Master Chief Collection, I find the Prometheans to be extremely fucking frustrating. Sometimes I even wonder how I liked the game as much as I did when it came out. I even enjoyed the multiplayer, but the multiplayer would become the bane of 343's existence, as its player count would plummet. Microsoft would be pissed, and the game could not maintain a multiplayer base for any reasonable amount of time, which has been an issue for 343 and the entire time managing the Halo franchise. Halo 4 was rapidly abandoned by the vast majority of its fans. 343 would look to fix this going forward. Now, continuing in my personal experience, the next thing I experienced from 343 was Hunt the Truth. Now, coming into the Hunt the Truth podcast, because I was such a big fan of Halo 4, and because the Hunt the Truth podcast was so good, my hype for Halo 5 was at an all-time level. I freaking loved the Hunt the Truth podcast. I liked the addition of bringing more about Oni's dirty laundry forward, because in reality, this shit happens all the time. You fight a major war, and then people start questioning some of the tactics you used in fighting that war. It becomes very common, and I thought Halo 5 took an interesting angle in its marketing material with this idea that the Master Chief was now seen as a traitor because he essentially stepped on the feet of Oni, and Oni took the Master Chief and destroyed his legacy because he risked making him look bad. I thought this could be a very cool idea for a Halo game. It does put it in a more Call of Duty-esque style light, but it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. The marketing surrounding Halo 5 was so goddamn false. I'm shocked Microsoft wasn't sued over it. Just look at some of these trailers.
Is this what you wanted? All hail the conquering hero. Is this what you were looking for? Was everything you've compromised, everything you've done, worth it? Let us remember him as our protector, and not the one who gave us this. As our savior, and not our betrayer. Let us see him forever. Was it? As you, and not as you. All hail the conquering hero. The one who was supposed to save us all. But now I must save us from you. You've completed your mission, Spartan Locke. Mine is just beginning.
From the lead up to Halo 5. And then remember when you actually played the game, none of this was in it. Halo 5 is the worst example of what marketing is in modern society. Nothing in the marketing campaign had anything to do with the actual game itself. They portrayed Oni as the bad guy. They portrayed Spartan Locke as the Chief's enemy. They portrayed the Master Chief as falling from grace. And when you actually played the game, everybody was just going after fucking Cortana, who died in Halo 4 and should not have even been in Halo 5. And then we finally got the game. So all of the marketing surrounding Halo 5 was actually good. I was excited. And I downloaded that midnight the night it came out, linked up with my brother and two of my friends, and we actually beat Halo 5 in about 3.5 hours. I was pissed. We blew through the game like it was nothing on its hardest difficulty with no real struggle. The game's credits rolled before I even went to bed the first night I bought it. And the story left me shocked and pissed off. We only played a couple missions with the Master Chief. Instead, Spartan Locke was put front and center, while Spartan Locke himself had about the personality of a wet tissue. He was like a piece of cardboard. Who really liked Spartan Locke in any sense? Halo 5 was such an absolute train wreck. Microsoft had to make up ways to say this game did better. See, every Halo game in the franchise before 5 actually increased its 24-hour gross. Now, if you look at the sale numbers here, you'll see that it looks like the 343 games haven't actually done that bad. But I've highlighted the games that set records in sales when they came out, because games didn't sell as much back then. Halo 5 started the collapse of Halo. And then, after all of the shit I've already mentioned about Halo 5, we got to the multiplayer. Oh my fucking god, the multiplayer was terrible in this game. It was Call of Duty mixed with Power Rangers and almost no Halo to be seen. And even saying Call of Duty is an insult to Call of Duty. Halo 5 was a piss-poor tragedy that deserves to be forgotten, but I refuse to let it. Then, 343 pivoted hard. Many of 343's lead designers, like the lead story writer and lead multiplayer designer of Halo 5, actually resigned following the game. That's how poor it did. Microsoft wasn't having it, and it forced a complete pivot and rebranding with Halo Infinite. Halo Infinite now, I've mentioned a lot in previous videos, but I haven't mentioned the campaign. Now, I actually really like Halo Infinite's campaign, and I even find this multiplayer fun. I think I mentioned that in my Why Halo Infinite Multiplayer is Dying video. It's a fun game to play, but the progression of the multiplayer is so bad. The lack of ability to win is so bad. The multiplayer gives you no incentive to actually play it besides its fun gameplay loop. The single player is fun, but the open world elements take largely away from it. However, this is 343's best game with the fans, actually getting a 8 on Metacritic from the fans, while the other two have a 7 and a fucking 6. And when you start comparing the average scores of the Bungie games, the average press scores, excluding ODST, of the Bungie games on Metacritic is actually a shockingly good 9.4 on average. That is insanity. Almost every Bungie game has record-breaking sales but Reach. Also, the fan aggregate score, or average score, on Metacritic, if you average together all the Bungie games, is an 8.5, which is actually really good, because if you remember back in these old days, the days of Halo 1 and the days of Halo 3, people would actually give games bad reviews, not because they disliked them, but because they hated the Xbox. A lot of times games like Halo would get panned the second they came out for being an exclusive. PlayStation fans would go on there and talk shit about them without ever actually playing them. And if you look at the aggregate score of 343 games from the press, you have an 8.6. A drop of 8 points is tremendously massive, especially from the press, because the press is always overly generous with the way they list these games. But the real damning drop is the fan aggregate score of a unreasonable 7.1 or 71. This is absolutely huge, as fans have rejected 343's attempts to make Halo games because you dropped 15 points of fan review score in an era where games are no longer being panned just for being an Xbox game. Instead, these games are being panned because they fucking deserve it. And you can see that coming when you see Halo 5 has a score of 6.4 and Halo 4 has a score of 7.1. You can see this. And I actually would disagree a bit with that personally. I'd give Halo 5 a 3. A fucking 3. And I'd give Halo 4 an 8. It is lifted up slightly by Halo Infinite, which is, like I said, has been pretty much well received by the majority of fans. Also, if you look at the sale numbers for the Halo series since 343's taken over, you also see that the trend is stagnant. They really have never got back close to that Halo 3 sale number. But as I pointed out, I actually highlighted the top 3 games, not because of 3 Bungie games, but because these 3 games broke world records for sales when they came out, and Halo 3 was the best-selling game of all time for years after it came out. And now you got Halo 5 Guardians coming out in an era where Skyrim sold 30 million copies. You're not even remotely competing with that top area anymore. And admittedly, you can no longer look at sales to determine games with Halo Infinite because of Game Pass and digital purchases. It becomes more and more impossible to determine sale numbers to determine success of a game, especially not with Game Pass. Till Infinite, you can still look at the sales of all of these games and realize the stagnation. Hell, Halo the Master Chief Collection almost outsold Halo 5, and Halo Anniversary sold nearly 3 million copies. So when you look at all of the stuff 343's worked on, you see the pattern of decline, which is what the Halo franchise has done in the time 343 has been managing it. So now I'm going to go through a list of the reasons 343 has failed. And I apologize, guys, this video is going to be long. So, the first sin 343 has committed, and I've mentioned this in a couple of the Halo Infinite videos, so I'm not going to dig too deeply into it, but we are going to touch on it again a little bit, and that is the fucking hubris. Now, I mentioned this in the Why Halo Infinite multiplayer is failing, and in the Halo Infinite Season 2 Lone Wolf review, where I basically bashed the game, 343's own hubris. But today I'd like to see if I can find a little bit more to talk about on this subject. And the problem is with 343 Industries' arrogance is 343 is unwilling to listen to the Halo community and past developers. I think I mentioned this in one of my previous videos, but when Microsoft acquired Activision Blizzard, several former Bungie employees who were still at Activision Blizzard wanted to come back to 343 to work on Halo. 343 turned down the offer because they claimed the Bungie employees would get in the way of their vision for Halo. This arrogance is ridiculous. This is somebody who has accomplished nothing, who took a franchise that was incredibly successful like Halo. Essentially, they took over Mr. Beast's fucking YouTube channel, and they lost 80 million subscribers. But because they still have 20 million subscribers, which is millions more than most people, they're walking around with their nose in the air like they fucking accomplished something. Instead, what they've actually done is pissed off almost every Halo fan. Because of their arrogance, it's hard to defend 343 or even like them. Even when they make a decent game like Infinite, I can't help but want to smash it into pieces because it's filled with problems, it has tons of bugs, it's unfinished, it's filled with microtransactions, and they do not care what their fans think. 343's arrogance has become a problem with public relations, a problem with the games, and a problem that makes me want to shout at a microphone for 20 minutes, just talking about how I want them to walk off a bridge. Next up in this is Microsoft's own problems, and that's Microsoft's unwillingness to actually make changes at 343 Industries. Bonnie Ross and Kiki Wolfkill have more or less been running this studio since it broke off from Bungie. Now, Bonnie Ross and Kiki Wolfkill both worked at Bungie originally, but these two women have been promoted to being completely in charge of the company and have been since its inception. And they have not done a good job with anything. They even failed at launching the Master Chief Collection. A collection of old games that weren't even upgraded visually with the exception of Halo 2 was a failure. You couldn't even play the multiplayer for months. Halo Infinite launches and the big team battle is broken for 6 months. You can't even manage to get a battle pass right. And this is why Microsoft is responsible. Any reasonable company would have moved on from these two women a long time ago. They would have fired Bonnie Ross and fired Kiki Wolfkill, or asked them to resign, which is more accurate, and then replaced them with new people. Because if you are not being successful in your job, then you should not keep it. Next up is greed. It is amazing how much greed 343 Industries is crawling with. They are worse than the dragon in the Hobbit movies. All they care about is the digital goods and microtransactions. All Halo Infinite really is a vessel to sell stupid cosmetics like cat ears and Santa Claus colors for $20. It's fucking ridiculous. People have more money than sense who buy this shit. You see, 343 Industries only truly cares about their cosmetic microtransactions and their battle pass, which is why they made Halo Infinite's multiplayer free to play. You don't even have to buy the campaign because they honestly don't give a shit if you never play the campaign at all. All they actually care about is whether or not you are spending money so you can spend money, 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 so you can spend money. The people who support this shit, I will never understand you guys. You are literally paying them $70.
Shut up and take my money.
So you can pay them again. How does that make sense in your head? That'd be like if you went to the store and bought yourself a nice big box of ice cream sandwiches for $10, and then every time you wanted an ice cream sandwich out of that box, you had to give Blue Bunny another $1 for that ice cream sandwich. But you already bought the goddamn box. Only video games get away with this bullshit. Any other industry wouldn't accept it. Could you imagine if movies did this shit? Buy your movie ticket to watch Avengers Endgame, and you sit down to watch the film, and the beginning plays, and you get to that final battle scene in the film, and Falcon's about to say on your left, and it pops up and says, well, you cannot continue this movie unless you buy the optional DLC. What? Also, all of the costumes are wrong and really stupid looking. They look like they're made of cardboard. But if you pay the premium, you can get the original Iron Man outfit back in the movie. I'm sure movie companies would love to do that if they could figure out how to make it work. The next problem 343 has is a lack of talent. Now, 343's talent level is pig trash. Now, for an example, the reason EA fails so much is EA likes to hire people straight out of college. They do not want to hire experienced developers because experienced developers can be very expensive. So instead, Electronic Arts hires people right out of college. I haven't heard the same thing about Microsoft, but I think that's probably what's happening here. You see, Halo 4 was in such a mess during its time in development, Microsoft had to actually go out and bring in one of the lead story writers of Mass Effect to actually help finish Halo 4's story. And why Halo 4's story works out to be one of the better ones in the franchise and probably the best one 343 has ever made is because they brought in premium talent to help finish it. And pretty much similar things include with Halo 5 Guardians and Halo Infinite. We're going to skip over Guardians, although they did bring in the lead story writer and original lead developer of Star Wars Republic Commando to help work on Halo 5 because, again, 343 could not manage to get anything going in the right direction. But the big one is Infinite. Infinite was in such a bad state after 3+ years of 343 working on it that showing it off at E3 was an absolute train wreck. People were furious looking at the graphics and lack of quality the game had. It was such an absolute train wreck. Microsoft bought Joseph Statham, the original story writer of Halo 1, 2, 3, and Reach. They actually bought his indie studio and then put him back in charge of the project of Halo Infinite, which is why Halo Infinite is such a well-received game with fans. He took back over, cut out 75% of the open world, rewrote the story, and created a story that more or less retconned everything 343 had done up to the point, which is why I still think Halo Infinite's campaign is really good. I don't mention it very often in my videos, but I think the campaign in Infinite is actually quite good. I kind of don't like the open world much. I wish it was all linear. But they also brought in the lead developer of Halo 3's multiplayer to come back and work on the multiplayer of Halo Infinite, which is why Halo Infinite's multiplayer is so much fun. But don't worry, because 343 Industries is trying their best to kill Halo Infinite's multiplayer with everything but the gameplay. Essentially, every element 343 themselves managed in Halo Infinite is terrible. Absolutely terrible. Take a look at it and just think about it. 343 Industries is responsible for the open world in Halo Infinite. They wanted 75% more of it, and it's trash. 343 Industry is responsible for the monetization and leveling system in Halo Infinite's multiplayer, and it's trash. 343 Industries is responsible for the rank, win-loss, and gamer cards in the multiplayer of Halo Infinite, and it's trash. The only things they're not responsible for are the story, the linear levels, and the gameplay of the multiplayer. These parts were handled by Joseph Statham and the former lead multiplayer writer and director of Halo 3. When you look at it, the lack of talent is clear. But going back to an earlier point, when you have a lack of talent and a ridiculous amount of hubris and arrogance, you are bound to fail. I like to compare 343 Industries to Willie Taggart. Willie Taggart took over a Florida State team that had had great success for 40 years under Bobby Bowden and then 10 years under Jimbo Fisher. And in 2 seasons, he ran the program into the ground that even Norvell has not been able to completely recover from because the damage he caused in 2 years was so incredible. And when you put people in positions of high stress, important jobs, difficult, undesirable positions for a long time who are unqualified or unskilled to do it, in spite of their best effort, the failure is inevitable, and the lack of talent at 343 is obvious. The next major issue for 343 is bad decision making. Now, you see, everything that happens with a game, movie, TV show is run through a committee nowadays. And I know it shouldn't be. It's a stupid way to do art. But it is. And everything this committee has come up with is terrible. As I pointed out with Halo Infinite, they had to bring in former members of the franchise to just kind of rip apart everything they had built. Essentially, all 343 is doing is looking at other popular games like Fortnite, Red Dead Redemption 2, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, or Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and saying that, we're gonna do that. That's not creativity. It's like a guy who watches a Mr. Beast video and then tries to recreate it. Well, we don't need that fucking video because we already have a Mr. Beast video. We don't need Halo to be Call of Duty because we already get a new Call of Duty game every 9 months. So by this piss poor decision making and lack of ideas, 343 continues to make games that have no uniqueness or nothing special about them. Once again, if it wasn't for Joseph Statham, Halo Infinite would be the same thing. Could you imagine if Halo Infinite had a 50-hour open world? The open world in the game now is bad enough, and this level of decision making must be blamed on Bonnie Ross and Kiki Wolfkill as the heads of the studio. I'm not saying that every one of these decisions was theirs, I'm not saying that every decision made is their fault, but I'm saying if you are the boss and a decision is made that destroys what you're supposed to be managing, then you are damn sure responsible for that decision. Bosses these days don't think they should be held responsible for their piss poor decisions. They think that you should blame their workers for it, but you're the fucking boss. It's your goddamn decision. Fix it or else. That's what Microsoft should say to these two ladies, but instead, they're not going to. Next up is complete confusion. You see, Halo Infinite, Halo 5, Halo 4, they don't know what they want to be. Halo 4 didn't know if it wanted to be Call of Duty in space or if it wanted to be Halo. Halo 5 didn't know if it wanted to be Power Rangers, if it wanted to be Call of Duty, if it wanted to be a political commentary, or it wanted to be Halo. You talk about confusing, this game doesn't even know what it is now. And Halo Infinite desperately wants to be a large, boring, repetitive open world game, but somebody absolutely forced that to not be a thing, fortunately, because the story levels in Halo Infinite are definitely the best part of the game. And when you have games that don't know what they want to be, you don't know what fan base you're marketing to. It's like, could you imagine if I made this video and I started off talking shit about 343, and then halfway through the video I talked really good about 343, and then back to talking bad, and then back to talking good, and then back to talking bad? No, because that makes no goddamn sense. You have to understand what you are and what you're marketing to. Are you marketing to the original fan base, which is probably at this point around 30 years old, or are you marketing to a new audience? If you're marketing to a new audience, then you are risking alienating your original fan base, which made you one of the most successful video game IPs of all time. And that leads us right into our next point, betraying the fan base. Now, this is unfortunately incredibly common throughout all of modern entertainment. The best example of this is actually Disney and what they've done to Marvel and Star Wars, but 343 Industries is as guilty as anyone else. You see, 343 Industries clearly hates the original Halo fan base, and they also hate fans in other countries. Recently, Iceblade telling me that he plays in other countries outside the US, and he can't even get into servers anymore because 343 has made it so hard for him to play. This is just further proof that 343 absolutely hates their own fan base. Their hatred of the past, unwillingness to bring back cosmetics, unwillingness to treat characters who are legacy characters in a respectable way. Just look at the Halo TV series or how they treated Cortana. Their unwillingness to listen to the legacy fans and what they want from this IP. Their complete and utter self-righteousness. 343 Industries clearly hates its own fan base. This is the stupidest thing I could possibly imagine. How do you hate your own goddamn fan base? These big companies need to take their head out of their ass and realize that without the fan bases that they so desperately hate, that they wouldn't even be anything. And the final thing we want to talk about here is the gameplay. Now, gameplay in Halo Infinite is actually really good, so Halo Infinite can be spared on this one. But Halo 4 and 5 are definitely not. You see, Halo 4 and 5's gameplay jumped far more into a semi-realistic military shooter / Call of Duty wannabe / Destiny clone. I think Halo 5 was probably chasing Destiny more than Call of Duty, but, you know, either way. This stupid, over-the-top mess. Just a complete trash can fire, the combat in Halo 4 and 5. Halo 4's combat introduced the worst enemy in gaming history and the freaking Prometheans that would jump around like ass clowns, making for an unfun fight. You get them weak and they teleport off. They had these stupid, annoying little dog things, and of course, everything has to be a robot because 343 has to have a teen rating. Well, fuck your teen rating. Give me human enemies and Covenant. I'm sick of shooting fucking robots. It's ridiculous. I thought that they would improve the combat with Halo 5, but instead, Halo 5 had the worst combat of any major FPS I think I've ever played. It was a complete fucking disaster. The Covenant were no longer fun to fight. The armor made them look so chunky and fat, it was terrible. Which is another thing I want to touch on here for a second, and that is the look of these characters affects combat greatly. And they took these kind of sleek, badass looking alien soldiers who look like a hybrid of a predator and an alien, and they turned them into these kind of chunky idiots wearing this giant armor that looked like they couldn't even move around with it if they wanted to. I feel like they should pull a freaking giant greatsword off their back and come sprinting at me. It also looks like their armor is made of freaking plastic, probably because they want them to look more like the fucking toys, so they can try to sell the toys to kids. And you gotta have that teen rating. Oh my god. The absolute shit show of Halo 5's cosmetics, of Halo 5's story, of Halo 5's combat. The combat was so goddamn bad in Halo 5, it made me literally want to shoot myself. And when you add it all together, you get extreme greed, extreme arrogance, extreme hubris, incompetence, stupidity, lack of skill, no oversight, no discipline, and no consequences for failure. And what you get is the trash can fire 343 industry has turned Halo into, with one decent campaign in Halo 4 and one pretty good campaign in Halo Infinite. It's clear that 343 is not capable, able, willing, intelligent, or skilled enough to actually manage this massive franchise they were gifted. And that is maybe the greatest tragedy in the game industry. To be given something that's already made for you. To be given a cake that's already finished and somehow still manage to screw it up. It's the 343 legacy. Well guys, thanks for watching this video. I know it's a little bit longer than normal. If you made it to the end, I really appreciate it. Please consider liking, sharing, subscribing. It really helps out. We got many other videos on this topic here. I have a why Halo Infinite multiplayer is dying video. We got one on Season 2. I also have a Halo Infinite versus Doom Eternal video. Now, I go into that very unbiased. I don't think I'm just going to be crapping on Halo the entire time. We also have a Witcher 3 versus the Elden Ring video, and why you should be excited for the Callisto Protocol, and why you should be excited for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre games. And I just want to say I really appreciate you guys. This channel's really been exploding lately. Hopefully it will continue. Anything you guys see or would like me to talk about, please let me know. I can do videos on Halo 5. I can do videos on whatever you guys would like. I appreciate you guys watching the video, and this is the Damn Nerd signing off.